The afternoon sun bore down mercilessly on the cracked earth as Sarah Nelson dropped to her knees in the field, tears mixing with the dust on her sunburned cheeks, staring at the barren land that had been her husband's dream before typhoid fever took him 3 months ago. San Diego, California, in the spring of 1878, was unforgiving to widows with nothing but 100 acres of stubborn soil and debts that grew faster than weeds. She pressed her palm against the ground, feeling the warmth seep through her worn leather gloves, and made a decision that would either save her or destroy what little remained of her shattered life. The bank had given her until harvest time to make a payment, which seemed like a cruel joke considering she had never planted anything more ambitious than a kitchen garden. But Thomas had believed in this land, had spent their last savings on it, and she would not let his memory be foreclosed upon by men in suits who had never felt dirt under their fingernails. Sarah stood, brushing off her faded calico dress, and walked back to the small wooden house that leaked when it rained and creaked in the wind. Inside, she found the seed corn Thomas had purchased before he fell ill. The burlap sack sat in the corner of their bedroom, a ghost of plans never realized. She lifted it, surprised by its weight, and carried it outside. The instructions Thomas had written in his careful hand were tucked inside. She unfolded the paper, reading his words about spacing and depth, irrigation and timing, and felt fresh grief wash over her. He had been so certain they would do this together. Sarah spent that evening reading everything Thomas had collected about farming. He had been a clerk before they came west, educated and methodical, always researching before attempting anything new. She found sketches he had made of the field layout, calculations about water needs, notes about the growing season. His handwriting blurred as exhaustion overtook her, but she forced herself to keep reading until the candle burned low. The next morning, she woke before dawn and began marking the field. Using stakes and string, she measured out the rows exactly as Thomas had planned. Her hands blistered within the first hour, but she kept working. The plow in the barn was too heavy for her to manage alone with their old horse, so she used a hoe to break ground, one small section at a time. By noon, she had completed perhaps 1/20th of what needed to be done, and her entire body screamed with pain. She was attacking the earth with grim determination when a shadow fell across her work. Sarah looked up, squinting against the bright sun, to see a man sitting astride a buckskin horse. He was tall and lean, with sandy hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes marked him as a working cowhand, worn denim and a faded blue shirt, boots scuffed from hard use. A battered hat shaded his face as he studied her efforts. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat, "I do not mean to intrude, but I have been watching you work from the road, and I have to say, you will be at this until Christmas if you keep using that hoe." Sarah straightened, aware of how she must look, her dark hair escaping its pins, her face red from exertion. "I appreciate your concern, but I can manage my own affairs." "I am sure you can," he said mildly, "but managing and efficiency are two different things. That plow in your barn would make faster work of it." "The plow is too heavy," she snapped, defensive. "My horse cannot pull it alone, and I certainly cannot." He dismounted in one smooth motion, moving with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on foot. "York Zimmerman," he introduced himself. "I have some experience with difficult situations and stubborn ground. I could help you get that plow working." "I cannot pay you," Sarah said flatly. "I can barely feed myself." York looked at the field, then back at her. "When I was riding through town yesterday, I heard the banker mention a widow out here trying to make a go of it alone. Seems to me that takes considerable courage. Or considerable stupidity, Sarah said bitterly. Most folks think it is the latter. Most folks have never tried to do something hard, York replied. What are you planning to plant? Corn, Sarah said, gesturing to the seed bags she had brought out. My husband purchased quality seed before he passed. He had it all planned out. York walked over to examine the bags, then looked at the string layout she had created. He knew what he was doing with the spacing. This is good planning. How long ago did you lose him? 3 months, Sarah said, and was annoyed when her voice wavered. Typhoid. He was sick for 2 weeks and then he was gone. I am sorry, York said, and something in his tone made her believe he understood loss. My parents died when I was 16. Cholera outbreak in Kansas. I know what it is like to have plans ripped away. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind rustling through the dry grass at the field's edge. Finally, York said, I was heading north to find work on one of the big ranches, but I am in no particular hurry. I could stay on for a few weeks, help you get this crop in the ground. In exchange, you could provide meals and a place to sleep. That barn of yours looks like it has decent hay storage. Sarah wanted to refuse. She had learned to be wary of men offering help that came with invisible strings. But she looked at the vast expanse of unplowed field and knew she could not do it alone, not in time. Meals and the barn, she agreed, but I want to be clear that is all I am offering. I would expect nothing else, York said. A deal is a deal, and I am a man of my word. Now let us see about that plow. York proved to be exactly what he claimed. He studied the plow, made some adjustments to the harness, and then brought his own horse to work alongside Sarah's aging mare. Together, the two animals managed the plow, and York guided it with experienced hands. The field that would have taken Sarah weeks to prepare was broken and ready within 4 days. She watched him work from dawn until dusk, his shirt darkening with sweat, his muscles straining but never complaining. She cooked for him in the evenings, simple meals of beans and cornbread, occasionally a rabbit he trapped or a chicken from her dwindling flock. They ate at the small table in her kitchen, and slowly, conversation began to flow between them. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about learning to work cattle, about the loneliness of drifting from job to job with no place to call home. Why do you not find a place to settle? Sarah asked one evening. York was quiet for a moment, running his finger around the rim of his tin cup. I suppose I have been looking for something worth settling for. Most places, I am just another hired hand. Easy to replace, easy to forget. That sounds like a hard way to live, Sarah observed. It is the only way I have known since my folks died, York admitted. But I always thought when I found the right place, I would know it. Somewhere I could build something that mattered. Sarah understood that longing more than she could express. Thomas and I came here because he wanted that too. He was tired of working in someone else's store, making someone else prosperous. This land was supposed to be our fresh start. It still can be, York said. He might not be here to see it, but that does not mean his dream has to die with him. His words kindled something in her chest, a warmth that felt dangerously like hope. She looked at this stranger who had appeared at her lowest moment, who asked for nothing but food and shelter, and wondered what kind of man offered his labor so freely. The plowing finished. They began planting. York showed Sarah how to check the soil moisture, how to judge the depth of each seed. They worked side by side, moving down the rows, and Sarah insisted on doing her full share. Her hands, already tough from years of housework, developed new calluses. Her back ached each night, but it was the good ache of honest work, of progress. York taught her the rhythm of planting, how to move efficiently without wasting motion. He talked about the crops he had helped plant on various farms and ranches, about the satisfaction of watching something grow from seed to harvest. His voice was steady and calm, and Sarah found herself looking forward to these conversations, to the easy companionship that was developing between them. "My husband was not a farmer by nature," Sarah confided as they worked one morning. "He was educated, always had his nose in a book. But he studied farming like it was a science, and I think he would have been good at it given time." "Book learning has its place," York said. "But there is something to be said for instinct too. You watch the sky, feel the wind, learn to read what the land is telling you." "And what is this land telling you?" Sarah asked. York straightened, scanning the field and the horizon beyond. "It is telling me it has been waiting for someone to believe in it. Soil like this, with proper care and good water, could grow just about anything. Your husband chose well." "The water is my biggest concern," Sarah admitted. "There is a stream that runs through the back section, but Thomas wrote that we would need to irrigate during the dry months." "We will figure it out," York said. Then he seemed to catch himself. "That is, you will figure it out. I will help you plan before I move on." Sarah felt an unexpected pang at the reminder that York would be leaving. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to having someone to share the burden with. But she simply nodded and kept planting. The work took 2 weeks of long days under the unforgiving sun. Sarah's skin, despite her bonnet, turned several shades darker. Her dresses grew looser as the physical labor burned through her meager reserves. But the field began to transform. Where there had been only bare earth, now neat rows of planted corn stretched in orderly lines, each seed placed with care, each row straight and true. On the final day of planting, they stood at the edge of the field as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with trepidation. The seeds were in the ground, but so much could still go wrong. Drought, pests, disease, any number of disasters could destroy her only chance at making the bank payment. "You are worrying," York observed. "Of course I am worrying," Sarah said. "Everything depends on this crop. If it fails, I lose everything Thomas worked for." York was quiet for a moment, then said, "May I tell you something my father told me before he died? He said that hope is not about knowing everything will turn out right. It is about choosing to believe in possibility even when the odds are against you." "That is a lovely sentiment," Sarah said, trying not to sound bitter. "But hope does not pay banknotes." "No," York agreed, "but it keeps you going when quitting would be easier. You could have given up when your husband died. You could have sold this place for whatever you could get and moved back east. Instead, you are out here fighting for something you believe in. That is not just hope, that is courage." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. No one had called her courageous. Most people in San Diego thought she was foolish, a woman in over her head, destined to fail. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Every single day I wake up terrified that I am making a terrible mistake." "Then you are brave and terrified," York said. "Those things can exist together." "The bravest person I ever knew was a trail boss who admitted he was scared every time we started a cattle drive. But he did it anyway, and he kept his crew safe through storms and stampedes and everything else the trail threw at us." They walked back to the house as darkness fell. Sarah lit the lamps while York washed up at the pump outside. She had made a pot of stew, extravagant by her recent standards, with actual beef from the butcher in town. It felt like a celebration was warranted, even if money was tight. Over dinner, York said, "I was thinking about your irrigation problem. That stream in the back runs year-round." "Thomas seemed to think so," Sarah said. "He walked the entire property before he purchased it. If we dug some channels to direct water to the field, built up small berms to control the flow, you could water the crops without hauling buckets all summer. It would be labor-intensive to set up, but once it is done, it is done. We? Sarah asked. York looked slightly sheepish. I suppose I have been saying we a lot. Sorry, force of habit. No, Sarah said slowly. I just thought you would be leaving now that the planting is finished. Well, York said, and she noticed he was not quite meeting her eyes. The thing is, I have been thinking. You will need help with the irrigation, and then there is weeding and protecting the crop from animals and eventually the harvest. That is a lot for one person. I cannot pay you, Sarah reminded him. Nothing has changed about that. What if something did change? York said, and now he did look at her directly. What if instead of wages, I worked for a stake in the harvest? Whatever this crop brings in, we split it evenly. That way, if it fails, you do not owe me anything, but if it succeeds, we both benefit. Sarah stared at him, trying to understand what he was really offering. You would stay here for months, working for nothing but the possibility of payment. I would be working for the certainty of purpose, York corrected. And the company is not bad either. She felt heat rise in her cheeks at his words. Why would you do this? You could find paying work elsewhere. York leaned back in his chair, considering his answer. I have been drifting for 8 years since my parents died. Working jobs that did not matter to me, moving on when I got bored or restless. But these last couple weeks, working this land, seeing something take shape because of our efforts, it has felt different. It has felt like it matters. It matters to me, Sarah said quietly. This land, this crop, it is all I have left of my husband's dreams. Then let me help you see it through, York said. Not as a hired hand, but as a partner. We planted this together. Let us harvest it together too. Sarah knew she should be cautious. She barely knew this man. But there was something in his steady gaze, in the honest work he had already done, that made her want to trust him. Partners, she said. Equal share in whatever comes, good or bad. York smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his sun-weathered face. Partners, he agreed. They shook hands across the table, and Sarah felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip, the warmth of human connection she had been missing since Thomas died. When he released her hand, she felt the absence like a chill. The next morning, they began work on the irrigation system. York laid out his plan, sketching in the dirt to show Sarah how water could be channeled from the stream to the field. It would require digging trenches, building wooden sluices to control water flow, and creating a system of gates that could be opened and closed as needed. It is ambitious, Sarah said, studying his drawings. Your husband was ambitious when he bought this place, York pointed out. Seems fitting to honor that. They started at the stream, which ran clear and cold from the hills east of her property. York waded in to check the depth and flow, then began marking where they would need to dig. Sarah worked beside him, learning as they went. The physical labor was even harder than planting had been, moving earth and rocks, shaping the land to their needs. During breaks, they talked. Sarah learned that York had been born in Missouri, but moved to Kansas as a child, that his father had been a saddle maker before turning to farming, that his mother had taught him to read using a Bible and a book of poetry. He had a sister somewhere, married and moved east, who he had lost touch with over the years. You miss her? Sarah asked. I miss having family, York admitted. Someone who knows your history, who remembers the same things you remember. When my parents died, it felt like I lost my whole world. My sister married quickly after, I think because she needed somewhere to belong. I was too young and too proud to go with them, thought I could make my own way. Do you regret that? Sarah asked. York was quiet, driving his shovel into stubborn clay. Some days. But regret does not change anything. You just have to keep moving forward. Sarah understood that philosophy. She had been moving forward since Thomas died, because stopping meant being swallowed by grief. Thomas and I had no family when we came here. We were both only children, our parents already gone. It was just the two of us against the world. That must have made losing him even harder, York said gently. It made everything harder, Sarah admitted. I had no one to tell me what to do, no one to help me figure out how to survive. The women in town tried to be kind, but they wanted me to give up the land, move into town, maybe take in sewing or washing. But I could not let go of what Thomas wanted for us. I am glad you did not, York said. Some things are worth fighting for. His words stayed with her as they worked through the hot afternoon. She found herself watching him when he was focused on his task, noting the way he moved with such efficiency, the concentration on his face, the gentleness with which he handled even rough work. He was nothing like Thomas, who had been slight and scholarly, always more comfortable with words than physical labor. But there was something about York that made her feel safe, made her believe that perhaps she was not facing impossible odds alone. Over the following weeks, the irrigation system took shape. It was rough work, punctuated by setbacks when a trench collapsed or a gate did not fit properly. But gradually, they created a network of channels that could carry water from the stream to the field. York showed Sarah how to open and close the gates, how to judge when the crop needed water, how to maintain the system. The corn began to sprout, delicate green shoots pushing through the dark soil. Sarah checked the field multiple times each day, unable to believe that something was actually growing. York caught her standing at the field's edge one morning, just watching the young plants sway in the breeze. "It is really happening," she said when he joined her. "Did you doubt it would?" York asked. "Every single moment," Sarah admitted. "Part of me still expects to wake up and find the field barren, all of this just a dream." "It is real," York assured her. "You made it real through hard work and determination. Thomas would be proud of you." Sarah blinked back tears. "I wish he could see this. He planned it all so carefully." "Maybe he can see it," York said. "I like to think the people we love do not completely leave us. Maybe they stick around to see how things turn out." It was a comforting thought, even if Sarah was not sure she believed it. But standing there with the growing corn before them and York solid and real beside her, she felt less alone than she had in months. As summer progressed, the work shifted to maintenance and protection. They walked the rows daily, pulling weeds that competed with the corn for water and nutrients. York built scarecrows to deter birds, and they took turns watching for deer and other animals that might damage the crop. Sarah learned to recognize the signs of insect damage, how to spot disease before it spread. York proved knowledgeable about more than just farming. He repaired the leaking roof on her house, fixed the gate on the chicken coop, and reinforced the barn door that had been hanging crooked. He never made her feel incapable, always explaining what he was doing and why, teaching rather than just taking over. One evening in late June, after a particularly long day of weeding, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The air was finally cooling after the day's heat, and Sarah had brought out glasses of water flavored with mint from her garden. "I have been thinking," York said, "about what happens after the harvest." Sarah's stomach tightened. She had been trying not to think about the future, afraid to hope too much. "What about it?" "Well, if the crop does as well as it seems to be doing, you will make your payment to the bank and have money left over. You will need to decide what comes next. Another corn crop, maybe diversifying, building up the house and barn. And where do you fit into those plans?" Sarah asked, her heart beating faster. York turned to look at her, his expression serious. "That depends on whether you want me to fit into them. I know we said partners for this harvest, but Sarah, I have to be honest with you. I am not sure I can walk away from this place when the time comes." "What are you saying?" Sarah needed to hear him spell it out. I am saying that somewhere between planting those first seeds and watching them grow, this stopped being just a job for me. This land, this work, it feels like home. The first real home I have had since I was 16. He paused, then added quietly, and you feel like home too. Sarah's breath caught. She had been drawn to York for weeks now, but had not let herself acknowledge it, still wrapped in grief and loyalty to Thomas's memory. York, I do not know if I am ready for this. I am not asking you to be ready, York said. I am just being honest about where I stand. You have been through hell this year, and the last thing I want is to make things more complicated. But I also cannot leave without you knowing that I have feelings for you, strong feelings. Sarah set down her glass with shaking hands. I care about you too. But Thomas has only been gone for months. Is it wrong to feel this way so soon? I cannot answer that, York said. But I know grief is not something you can schedule, and I know that life is short and uncertain. My parents died within days of each other. Your husband went from healthy to gone in 2 weeks. We do not get guarantees about how much time we have. So what do? Sarah asked. We take it one day at a time, York suggested. We finish this crop, we see it through to harvest, then we decide what comes next together. No pressure, no promises except to be honest with each other. Sarah nodded, relief and anxiety swirling together. One day at a time, she agreed, but something had shifted between them. They were both aware of it, a new awareness that colored every interaction. When York's hand brushed hers as they worked side by side, Sarah felt electricity shoot through her. When she brought him lunch in the field, she noticed the way his eyes followed her movements. The air between them hummed with possibility and restraint. July brought the intense heat that Southern California was known for. The irrigation system proved its worth as temperatures climbed, and rainfall became sporadic. They opened the gates in the early morning and late evening, letting water flow to the thirsty corn. The plants grew tall and strong, their roots deep in the nourished soil. Sarah rode into San Diego one Saturday for supplies and encountered the banker, Mr. Henderson, outside the general store. He was a portly man with mutton-chop sideburns and an expression of permanent skepticism. Mrs. Nelson, he said, tipping his hat with minimal courtesy. I trust you have not forgotten about your loan payment. It is due at harvest time, Sarah said coolly. As we agreed. Yes, well, I must say I have my doubts about whether you will meet that obligation. Perhaps we should discuss alternative arrangements. Such as? Sarah asked, though she knew exactly what he would suggest. The bank would be willing to take the property now, clear your debt, and provide you with a small settlement, enough to start fresh somewhere more suitable for a woman alone. I am not alone, Sarah said before she could stop herself. I have a partner. Henderson's eyebrows rose. Oh, I was not aware you had remarried. I have not remarried, Sarah said, irritated at having to explain. I have a business partner. We are working the land together. I see, Henderson said, his tone implying he saw more than she had meant to convey. Well, I hope this partnership proves more successful than I anticipate, but the bank's offer stands should you change your mind. Sarah purchased her supplies and left town quickly, fuming at Henderson's condescension and her own defensive reaction. When she returned to the farm, York was working on reinforcing one of the irrigation channels. She told him about the conversation as they walked back to the house. Do not let him get under your skin, York advised. Men like that cannot imagine someone succeeding outside their narrow view of how things should be. When you make that payment, his opinion will not matter. I told him we were partners, Sarah said. It probably just gave the gossips more to talk about. Were you embarrassed to say it? York asked. No, Sarah said honestly. I was proud, but I also know how things will look to certain people. York stopped walking, turning to face her. Sarah, I do not care what people think, but I care what you think, how you feel about this situation. If my being here is causing you problems, I need to know. You being here is the only thing keeping me from complete despair, Sarah said, surprising herself with her vehemence. I do not care what the banker or anyone else thinks. I just wish the world was not so quick to judge. The world is always quick to judge, York said, especially when it comes to women doing things they are not supposed to do, but you have never struck me as someone who lives by other people's rules. Sarah laughed despite herself. Thomas used to say I was stubborn as a mule. I would say determined as a force of nature, York countered. They smiled at each other, and Sarah felt the tension ease. Whatever was developing between them, it was real and worth protecting, regardless of what others thought. August arrived with even more intense heat. The corn was now shoulder-high, tassels forming, ears beginning to develop. Sarah felt cautious optimism building. If they could just get through the next few weeks without disaster, they would have a crop to harvest. York shared her guarded hope, checking the plants daily for signs of stress or disease. One afternoon, a wagon rolled up the road to the house. Sarah shaded her eyes, trying to identify the visitors. As they drew closer, she recognized Agnes Morrison, one of the few women from town who had been genuinely kind after Thomas died, and her husband Robert, who owned a large ranch north of San Diego. "Mrs. Nelson," Agnes called as she climbed down from the wagon. "I hope you do not mind us dropping by unannounced." "Of course not," Sarah said, though she felt suddenly self-conscious about her worn dress and wind-blown hair. "Would you like some water? Or I could make coffee." "Water would be lovely," Agnes said. "It is beastly hot." They settled on the porch while Robert walked out to examine the field with York. Agnes, a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and graying hair, studied Sarah with concern. "I wanted to come sooner," Agnes said, "but Robert kept saying you probably wanted to be left alone." "Men never understand that sometimes we need company, not solitude." "I have been very busy," Sarah said, not quite answering. "So I see. That field looks remarkable. Robert has been telling anyone who will listen that you are going to prove all the doubters wrong." "Robert said that." Sarah was surprised. "He respects hard work and determination," Agnes said, "and he thinks you have both in abundance. He also thinks that young man helping you knows his business." "York has been invaluable," Sarah admitted. "I could never have managed any of this alone." Agnes leaned forward slightly. "People are talking, you know, about a widow and a single man living in such close proximity." Sarah felt her defenses rise. "York sleeps in the barn. Our arrangement is entirely proper." "I am not criticizing," Agnes said quickly. "I am just warning you that not everyone will be as generous in their interpretation. Some folks have small minds and smaller lives, and they fill them with gossip about others." "Let them talk," Sarah said. "I have more important things to worry about than idle gossip." Agnes smiled. "Good for you. But Sarah, if you need a friend, someone to talk to about matters that may be confusing or complicated, I hope you will come to me. Being a widow is hard enough without facing it completely alone." Sarah felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. She had been so focused on survival that she had not let herself acknowledge how isolated she felt. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more than you know." Robert and York returned, deep in conversation about irrigation techniques. Robert was impressed with the system they had built, asking detailed questions about construction and maintenance. As the Morrisons prepared to leave, Robert pulled York aside. Sarah could not hear their conversation, but she saw Robert gesture toward his ranch in the distance, saw York nod thoughtfully. After the Morrisons left, Sarah asked York what Robert had said. "He offered me a job," York admitted. Said he is always looking for experienced ranch hands, and he was impressed with the work we have done here. Good wages, year-round employment. Sarah felt her heart sink. Are you going to take it? No, York said simply. I told him I am committed to seeing our harvest through, and after that, well, after that I have other hopes for my future. What hopes? Sarah asked, though she thought she knew. York stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. I hope to stay right here if you will have me, not as a hired hand or even a business partner, but as something more permanent. York, Sarah began, but he gently interrupted. I am not asking for an answer now. I know it is too soon, that you need time. But I want you to know where I stand, what I am hoping for. I am falling in love with you, Sarah. Actually, I think I have already fallen, and I want to build a life here with you if you will let me. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. I do not know how to stop grieving Thomas and start feeling these things for you. You do not have to stop grieving, York said. Love is not a finite resource. You can honor Thomas's memory and still let yourself live, let yourself feel. He would want that for you. How can you be sure? Sarah asked. Because if I loved you and died, I would want you to find happiness again. I would want you to live fully, not lock yourself away in grief. That is what real love does. It wants the best for the other person, even when we are not there to share it. Sarah reached up and touched York's face, feeling the roughness of his beard, the warmth of his skin. I am frightened, she admitted. So am I, York said. But I would rather be frightened and with you than safe and alone. She leaned forward, and he met her halfway. Their first kiss was tentative, questioning, both of them aware of the significance of crossing this threshold. But as Sarah felt York's arms come around her, felt the solid reality of him, something inside her unlocked. She kissed him with months of loneliness and fear and desperate hope, and he responded with equal intensity. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sarah rested her forehead against his chest. What are we doing? Living, York said, his voice rough with emotion. We are choosing to live. The weeks that followed were colored by their new understanding. They were careful, aware of propriety and appearances, but the love between them grew like the corn in the field, strong and undeniable. York remained in the barn at night, but their days were filled with small intimacies, hands touching as they worked, stolen kisses when no one was around to see, conversations that stretched into the evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. Sarah felt guilt sometimes, especially at night when she lay alone in the bed she had shared with Thomas. Was she betraying him by falling in love so soon? But then she would remember York's words about love wanting the best for the beloved, and she would think about how Thomas had always wanted her to be happy, to live fully. Gradually, the guilt faded, replaced by gratitude that she had been given a second chance at love. The corn continued to thrive. By late August, the ears were filling out, the kernels developing from pale and tender to firm and golden. York taught Sarah how to test an ear for readiness, how to judge when the crop would be ready to harvest. Another 2 weeks, he estimated, in early September. Maybe 3. We want to give it every chance to reach full maturity. Sarah did the calculations. The bank payment was due September 30th. If they harvested by mid-September and got the corn to market quickly, they would make the deadline with a little room to spare. It was going to be close, but it was possible. They began preparing for the harvest, sharpening tools, arranging for wagons to transport the corn to market, lining up buyers. Robert Morrison agreed to purchase a portion of their crop for his ranch, and he helped Sarah contact other potential buyers in San Diego and the surrounding area. The prices were good, better than she had dared hope. If the harvest came in as strong as it appeared, she would not only make her payment but have money left over. The night before they were to begin harvesting, Sarah could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind rustle through the corn, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. Thomas's death, her decision to plant the crop, York's unexpected arrival, the backbreaking work, the growing love between them, all of it had led here. She got up and walked outside, drawn to the field. The moon was nearly full, bathing everything in silver light. She walked between the rows, running her hands along the tall stalks, feeling the weight of the full ears. They had done it. Against all odds, they had actually done it. She heard footsteps and turned to see York approaching from the barn. "Could not sleep either," he asked. "Too much anticipation," Sarah admitted. "Tomorrow changes everything." "It does," York agreed. "One way or another, after tomorrow, you will know you can do this. You will have proof that you are strong enough to survive anything." Sarah corrected. "We will have proof that we are strong enough together." York smiled. "Together sounds good to me." They stood in the moonlit field, and York pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know this is not exactly the romantic moment this deserves, but I cannot wait any longer. Sarah Nelson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. "York, I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he urged. "Say you will let me stay here with you, not as a hired hand or a business partner, but as your husband. Say you will build a life with me on this land. Say you love me." "I do love you," Sarah said, the words coming easily now. "I love your kindness and your strength and your patient way of teaching me things. I love how you believed in me when I did not believe in myself. I love how you made me laugh again after I thought I would never laugh again. Is that a yes?" York asked, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "Yes," Sarah said. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes to all of it." York let out a whoop of joy that probably woke every animal for miles. He swept Sarah into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he opened the box to reveal a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing I have from her. I have been carrying it for 8 years, waiting to find someone worth giving it to." Sarah let him slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "It is beautiful," she whispered. They kissed in the moonlight, surrounded by the corn they had planted together, and Sarah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was not betraying Thomas's memory. This was honoring his dream by continuing to fight for the land he had wanted, by choosing to live and love and build something lasting. The next morning, they began the harvest. It was brutal work, cutting and hauling the heavy stalks, stripping the ears, loading them into wagons. They worked from dawn until long after dark, and Sarah felt every muscle in her body protest. But the crop was good, better than they had dared hope. The corn was healthy and abundant, each ear full and heavy. Robert Morrison sent some of his ranch hands to help, refusing payment, saying it was what neighbors did for each other. With the extra help, they harvested the entire field in 5 days. The corn was transported to market, sold to eager buyers, and Sarah found herself holding a bank draft for more money than she had ever seen. She and York rode into San Diego together to make the payment to the bank. Henderson looked surprised and slightly disappointed to see them, but he processed the payment with professional efficiency. Sarah kept the receipt carefully folded in her pocket, proof that she had done what everyone said was impossible. Outside the bank, York asked, "How do you feel?" "Lighter," Sarah said. "Like I have been carrying a massive weight and suddenly it is gone." "What do you want to do now?" York asked. Sarah thought about it. "I want to go home. I want to start planning next year's crop. I want to marry you and start our life together." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Morrisons' ranch, with Agnes and Robert as witnesses. Sarah wore her best dress, freshly cleaned and mended, and York wore new clothes purchased with his share of the harvest money. Agnes had picked wildflowers for Sarah to carry, and Robert provided a wedding supper that was more elaborate than anything Sarah had eaten in months. As Sarah and York exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever came, Sarah felt Thomas's presence like a benediction. She thought she heard him whisper on the wind that he was happy for her, that he was proud of what she had accomplished, that he wanted her to live fully and love deeply. York moved his belongings from the barn to the house that night, and Sarah no longer slept alone. They lay together in the darkness, talking about their plans for the farm, for their future. York wanted to expand the irrigation system, maybe plant wheat in addition to corn, build up the livestock. Sarah wanted to repair the house properly, maybe add a room for the children they both hoped to have. "I want at least 3, York said. "A whole pack of kids running around, learning to work the land, learning to be part of something bigger than themselves." "3 sounds perfect," Sarah agreed, nestling closer to him. Winter came, a time for rest and planning. They made improvements to the house and barn, studied farming techniques, and enjoyed the luxury of time together without the pressure of immediate survival. Sarah learned York's rhythms, his preferences, his habits. He was a quiet man, thoughtful and steady, but with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He was patient with her grief when it surfaced unexpectedly, holding her when she cried for Thomas, never threatened by the love she still carried for her first husband. In the spring of 1879, they planted again, this time a larger field with improved techniques based on what they had learned. Sarah worked alongside York, but she also found time to cultivate a larger garden to expand her chicken flock, to make the place feel more like a home. Agnes Morrison became a close friend, visiting regularly, and other women from town slowly followed her lead. Sarah was no longer the pitiable widow, but Mrs. Zimmerman, a successful farmer with a devoted husband. The second harvest was even better than the first. With the profits, they purchased more land from a neighbor who was moving back east. They invested in better equipment, built a proper irrigation well, and added a milk cow and some pigs to their growing farm. Each season brought new growth, new challenges, new triumphs. Sarah discovered she was pregnant in the fall of 1879. York was beside himself with joy, treating her like she was made of glass, which amused and sometimes irritated her. She continued working as long as she was able, though York insisted she avoid heavy lifting. Their first child, a son they named Thomas York Zimmerman, was born in May of 1880. Sarah wept as she held him, overwhelmed by love and gratitude and the bittersweet wish that her first husband could have seen this child who carried his name. York held them both, his own eyes wet with tears, and promised to be the best father he could be. Life settled into a rhythm of planting and harvest, of watching their son grow, of building their farm into something substantial. A daughter, Grace, arrived in 1882, followed by another son, Daniel, in 1884. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the farm prospered under their combined efforts. Sarah never forgot that first desperate season, kneeling in the dirt with nothing but a widow's determination and a dead husband's seeds. She told the story to her children as they grew, about how York had appeared when she needed help most, how they had planted corn in neat rows, how he had planted hope beside her and promised to harvest together. "Your father kept his promise," she would tell them. Not just about the harvest, but about everything. He promised to stay, and he stayed. He promised to build a life with me and look at everything we have built. York would usually add, and your mother kept her promises too. She promised to fight for this land, and she did. She promised to let me love her, and that was the greatest gift I ever received. The children would roll their eyes at their parents' sentimentality, but Sarah could see they loved hearing the story, loved knowing that their family had been forged in hardship and hope. Years passed. The children grew and learned to work the land. Thomas, their eldest, showed his namesake's scholarly bent alongside York's practical skills. Grace was fierce and determined, reminding Sarah of herself. Daniel was the dreamer, always looking toward the horizon, wondering what lay beyond. In the summer of 1895, Sarah stood at the edge of the field watching York teach Thomas and Daniel about crop rotation, while Grace pestered them with questions about why they had to do things a certain way. 17 years had passed since that desperate afternoon when she had knelt in the dirt ready to give up. 17 years of hard work, of love, of building something that mattered. York caught her watching and walked over, still moving with that easy cowboy grace despite approaching 40. His hair had some gray now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but to Sarah, he was as handsome as the day he had ridden up on his buckskin horse. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "How far we have come," Sarah said. "Sometimes I can hardly believe all of this is real." "It is real because you made it real," York said. "You refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier." "We made it real," Sarah corrected. "I could never have done any of this without you." "We made a good team," York agreed. "Still do." They stood together watching their children, watching the crops grow in neat rows, watching the sun paint the sky gold and orange as it sank toward the horizon. The land that had once seemed like an impossible burden now felt like a gift, a place where they belonged, where they had built something lasting. That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah and York sat on the porch as they had countless times before. The night was warm, the air filled with the sounds of crickets and distant cattle. York held Sarah's hand, running his thumb over the gold band she still wore, his mother's ring that had become her own. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Staying here instead of moving on?" "You could have worked for Morrison or any of a dozen other ranches. You could have been earning steady wages instead of gambling on a widow's impossible dream." York laughed softly. "Regret? Sarah, staying here, building this life with you, it is the best decision I ever made. Every morning I wake up grateful that my horse happened to be passing by that day, grateful that I stopped to offer help, grateful that you were brave enough to accept it." "I am grateful too," Sarah said, "for everything, for your help, for your love, for giving me a reason to keep fighting." "You always had that reason," York said. "I just reminded you of it." They sat in comfortable silence, Sarah leaning against York's shoulder, both of them content in the life they had built together. The farm that had started as one woman's desperate attempt to honor her dead husband's dream had become a thriving enterprise, a home, a legacy for their children. In the years that followed, the farm continued to grow. Thomas married a schoolteacher from San Diego and built a house on the northern section of the property. He ran that section of the farm with the same methodical attention to detail that his namesake would have appreciated. Grace shocked everyone by becoming one of the first women in California to attend agricultural college, returning home with innovative ideas about crop management and soil conservation. Daniel eventually left to seek adventure, but he came home often, drawn back by the pull of family and the land that had shaped him. Sarah and York grew old together, their hair turning silver, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work, but their love never diminished. If anything, It deepened with time, tempered by shared challenges, enriched by shared triumphs. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. The house was full of laughter and chaos, 3 generations sharing stories and food and love. Agnes Morrison was there, now elderly herself, still sharp-witted and kind. Robert had passed a few years earlier, but Agnes remained a close friend and frequent visitor. After the meal, Sarah found herself standing in the same spot where she had once knelt in despair, where she had made the decision to fight for Thomas's dream. The fields were different now, more extensive and diverse, but the land was the same. The California soil that had seemed so unforgiving had yielded abundance when treated with respect and determination. York came to stand beside her, as he always did. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, the same question he had asked countless times over the years. "I am thinking about a scared widow and a drifting cowboy who planted corn in neat rows," Sarah said, "and how you planted hope beside me and promised to harvest together." "We did harvest together," York said, "and we are still harvesting. Look at all of this, Sarah. Look at what we built." Sarah looked at their children and grandchildren, at the prosperous farm, at the life they had created from dust and desperation. "We did good work," she said. "We did great work," York corrected, pulling her close. "And we are not done yet." They stood together as the sun set over the fields they had planted, watered, and harvested year after year. The neat rows of crops stretched toward the horizon, a testament to hard work and partnership and love that refused to give up. Sarah thought about that afternoon in 1878 when everything had seemed hopeless, when she had been ready to surrender to despair. She thought about York riding up on his buckskin horse, offering help with no expectation of reward. She thought about the choice she had made to trust, to hope, to fight for something that mattered. The corn they had planted that first season was long gone, harvested and consumed, but the hope York had planted beside her had never stopped growing. It had sustained them through drought and debt, through the exhausting work of building a farm and raising a family, through every challenge life threw at them, and they had harvested together, just as he had promised. Not just corn, but a life rich in love and purpose, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. As darkness fell and the family began to drift back toward the house, Sarah took one last look at the fields. Tomorrow, they would work them again. Tomorrow, they would continue the cycle of planting and growing and harvesting. Tomorrow, they would keep the promises they had made to each other all those years ago. But tonight, she simply stood with York under the stars, grateful for the cowboy who had planted hope beside her, grateful for the harvest they had gathered together, grateful for every moment of the life they had built on this California land. The neat rows of their first planting had grown into a vast farm, a strong family, a legacy of love and determination. And Sarah knew, with the certainty that comes from living through the impossible and coming out the other side, that this was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the right person beside her. Their story, begun in desperation and hope, had become something beautiful and lasting, proof that even in the hardest times when everything seems lost, love and partnership can transform barren ground into abundant harvest.